Hello, so it's been a while since we've done a live stream of any drawing or digital painting. I've been just fixing up my office and then I had big internet issues. So I'm hoping that all of that is now fixed and we don't have any more issues and this can be a more regular thing. Today I'm going to be working on this old Spider-Gwen piece that I did a line drawing of, but I wasn't all that happy with it, but I think I'd be really happy with it as a digital painting. So I wanted to take you along the steps of where I turn the basic line illustration here into a digital painting. So let's get started here. Okay, so here's what I got so far. So first thing I'll probably do is I will usually just pick out a spot and work. Sometimes I'll do the entire color of the background first. That will just help with creating kind of a color unity over the entire piece. But I'm not exactly sure what direction I'm going to go first. So I'm just going to kind of start in here on her costume. And we'll go from there. So I believe she's got like a blackish kind of tone in the legs area here. So I'm just going to... I want a little bit of a reddish tone to it overall, I think, just in where it highlights. So I'm going to take kind of like a dark kind of purple that's very close to gray, and I'll jump in here. Now I'm using the paint tool on India ink right now, and I got it on Bit Husky brush. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to kind of outline this and then I'll fill it. Now I know this fill tool is supposed to be amazing because it can fill without creating kind of this there's like a little line where it doesn't quite all match up usually that you'll see in like Photoshop and stuff. Let me just grab my hard eraser here. I'm just gonna... So I'm still learning this program. I was mostly a Photoshop user before switching over. And I do really like the tools in Clip Studio here. So if you don't know, I'm using Clip Studio Paint right now, and I'm using a Lenovo MSP 19 Plus drawing monitor. That's getting pretty long in the tooth about now. Hopefully I will be able to upgrade at some point in the next year here, just with everything that's been going on in the world and the economy. It's been tough to upgrade any of my equipment. Now, hopefully this, right now it does the job. If you're looking for a drawing monitor, I would probably steer you more towards, if you have the money, of course, the Wacom, or even iPad Pro with the Apple Pen. That's a good option if you want something that is multi-use. I've tried going the laptop route. I do have a laptop with a Lenovo Yoga, but I don't know if it's just because the specs, even though they're similar, except for the video card in my standard PC here, my desktop, it just doesn't have the ability to draw kind of smooth, and I find that the pen, even though I bought the upgraded Wacom pen, it's just not I just don't like the feel as much. I find that my laptop screen gets so warm while working on it. It's very uncomfortable to work on it for very long periods. So I think I've only really done one piece that I went from start to finish on that monitor. Now here's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if I turn off, I want this to fill completely without that line there. So I'm trying to figure out how you do that. Apply effect. It's better. What does this do? Specifies whether scale it area up or down. For multiple layers. No, we don't want that. Apply to connected pixels only. Close gap. I don't know. Set the width of gaps. Treat as closed. Okay. Let's try the area scaling and see if that makes a difference. Seem to. What if I up that? I don't know if that really made. Let's bring that back down and see what that does. Okay, so that does definitely make a difference. So I'm just gonna bump it all the way up to the 20 level there. And I guess that's about as good as I'm gonna get right now with that. So I'm just gonna go back in here, fill the gaps here. Now lighting wise, I'm going to probably be changing up what I had in the original drawing a little bit. I did a couple tests, and I did like one with the same kind of light sourcing that I was doing, just a black and white test, to kind of look at the light direction. So I did kind of what I did in the original drawing, and then I kind of did more of a, basically inverted it, and it looks so good inverted that I'm thinking I'm gonna go that route with the lighting. It might change the time of day I'm gonna end up doing this as. I know you probably should have all this worked out beforehand, but the part of my process is to keep myself like excited about it, is discovering stuff as I work. Otherwise, a lot of the excitement goes away. So I like to keep it pretty open as I'm working on it, just to make any changes that I need or that I want to do whenever, and not feel like I'm stuck to a certain look or something along those lines. All right, now I'm just going to switch the brush here. I'm going to start putting some highlights in there. Now I've downloaded some brushes. I got these free. Let me just Google the name of the guy who put them out, because I think I mentioned it a bunch of times incorrectly. So I'm just gonna look him up here just to give him credit. So it's Ahmed Aldouri. He's got a YouTube channel that with lots of digital painting tips, and I think you can go to his site and he has some paint brushes that you can download. Now they're made specifically for Photoshop, but they work fine in Clip Studio. So far, at least for me, they have worked really good. And so let's go here. Sorry, when I click off there, I gotta click back on before my tool shows up properly. All right. So I got a kind of a line going across here. I'm just using kind of my original reference here, my test piece here as reference. That's just going to help me kind of get this stuff blocked in a bit quicker. Now we'll probably go for around an hour or so today. I do have a grocery delivery coming at some point, so hopefully that's not during any of the stream. It shouldn't be, but you never know nowadays. A lot of times they'll get you when they can. So maybe I'm looking a little too much over at my reference here. I just need to fill spots here. Now you just do a lighter pressure, and with any kind of drawing tablet, you'll get kind of a lighter look. What I like about this brush in particular, this is the oil one. As with a lot of these oil mimicking brushes, is you do have it is emulating the actual brushstroke look. There's some people that I've talked about on here before, how a lot of artists now kind of poo-poo people with stuff that looks overly digital. I have no real problem with that. I mean, if you really are like, then just work and just don't work digitally if you don't like the look. But some people kind of act like it's a lesser than kind of look and art style when you have this really kind of clean look to everything. I don't know how a person gets an idea of that, because and especially these people that do work digitally, like every medium has its own, like it takes on the look of the medium. So are you a digital artist, or are you a mimicker of other art techniques and styles? Like I do like it to have some sort of natural look, something that's organic, but you can do that as well without, specifically trying to make it look exactly like something that was traditionally painted. And let's be honest, there's no techniques or anything at this point that really mimic. Like, you can get pretty darn close, but anybody who is a digital artist or has worked in any digital medium like that, even like a photographer or anybody who's spent extensive time in Photoshop or any photo manipulation software, they will tell. I mean, there's just the texture and the physical layering of paint that is different than you will be able to achieve with digital. There are programs that mimic it, but it's very heavy-handed at this point. Like, it's hard to get the real kind of in-betweenness of that I think that it would need to really, in my mind. But then what are you doing, right? Why aren't you just working as in that medium in the first place? If you really like the look of oil paints, I mean, cost is one. That's what my main reason of working mostly digitally is. If I wanted to paint every day, there's no way I could afford it, at least not at this point in my life. But I can digitally paint as much as I want, and all of those skills are transferable. Just because you digitally paint today doesn't mean that you can't paint traditionally tomorrow. Now, instead of looking at this reference so much, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lower the opacity of this layer a little bit, just so I can see kind of like where my lines are poking through there. That is helping me already. So I just don't know if that's going to affect my let me check my eyedrop tool here. Pick up color from layer. That's what I want. Yeah. Because otherwise it was picking up from the screen, and if I lowered the opacity on this, it's going to lower the opacity of what my color picker is, and it's going to be a mixture of the two, and that's not what I want. So basically what I'm going to do is just quickly get in kind of where the highlights are going to be. And where the shadows are. Just because then I can change the opacity back and really see better what I'm doing here. This will give me kind of an idea. It's important to know kind of like anatomy and stuff, especially in your pre-drawing stage. I will be doing more stuff where I'm doing from the pre-drawing stage. I know that the last two, the digital painting ones, I'll probably be doing the sketches off camera first, just because they do take up the bulk of my time when I'm trying to figure stuff out. But I don't want to totally neglect people learning kind of the way I go about doing stuff. All right. So as you can see there, if I zoom out a bit, now we got kind of an idea, better idea at least, of kind of the shapes we're going for. Some of these I'm not too happy with yet, but we'll get them there. And lower that down. And what we're gonna do. Something people often neglect is like folds and stuff, and no matter how tight something is, you will get some kind of wrinkling, folding. What's his name? Is it Stanley Lau? That's Art Germ is what most people I think know him by. That's what his I know his Instagram account was. He does really good job at showing the folds and such in this kind of tight costuming that the superheroes wear. There's something going on here that I'm not a big fan of. There's some guys who say, you know, you got to keep a similar paint brush size and stuff. I don't really go by that either. Or some people, I guess. Now, basically, if you really want something to kind of a line or an area to kind of stick out, it's often neglected. Just putting a highlight beside the extremely dark shadow is probably your best way of creating that. Because if you just have like a lighter tone here, even though it's beside darker tones, you just aren't going to get that separation, and the depth doesn't seem correct. So even though this is going to be kind of a darker, than that actual highlight line, not really particularly happy with that shape. Need to work it here. It's a lot, like I often say that painting, especially traditionally, I find it a lot like sculpting. You're basically sculpting with light. So you're creating depth and shapes with light. You're pulling stuff out of shadow and kind of creating your shapes and forms that way. And yeah, so then we're gonna bring this highlight here. Instead of that kind of ending, we're gonna bring that across there. If you're ever having trouble just blending, you could just use the color picker a lot. Just picking a color, work it in, pick a color, work it in. There's a lot of people who use like the blending tool. I'll use that to like soften up something. If I think that an area is just not working because it's like I'm just getting too hard of transitions, then I might use the blender. Or if something is looking just too worked over and you see, like often you'll see, let me show you here. I don't know what pen. In Photoshop, I know what pen I would use to show you this, but let's get like maybe, let's see what this one does. So say I had this color here. This will work, I think. And this one here. Now, a lot of people, you'll work your way in here and you'll work your way in here. And then you'll lighten up. And you'll lighten up. And you can get kind of a nice smooth transition. But every once in a while, you'll see it kind of like a stepped line. So you have like one color there and it will look very distinct that you have a different color next to it. And then another color next to it. So it's almost like you're looking at a gradient like table instead of something smooth. Then you might want to go in with some sort of blender and, you know, just smooth all that out. But it just depends on the look you want. There's some brushes in Photoshop that a lot of digital painters kind of start with, and they use opacity as well as what is it called in Photoshop? So you have opacity, and then you have Why am I drawing a blank right now? Jeez, I almost have to open up Photoshop here to take a look. Let me just Google Photoshop's menu or interface, and then I can tell you. Brush. Oh, of course, all that's popping up is people's paintbrushes. I want to say it's strength, but that doesn't sound right to me. So hopefully if I open up Photoshop here, it's not going to crash everything on us here. But we'll try. And let's see, file. Sorry, I gotta open up a Photoshop file now. Yeah, I still do have Photoshop. I just am trying to not use it for painting. So you have flow. So often I find that these Clip Studio paintbrushes kind of work mostly on the flow and not opacity. So opacity, basically you're stacking a bunch of different strengths of that, you know, like, how can I show this here? So say I had a bunch of layers, and on one layer I will do a color, and on another layer, instead of pressing lighter, I'm going to do another color, the same color, lighter, and then I will do even lighter yet. And you're getting a different color or different tonal variation, but you see where the overlap is? That's what I'm talking about. You'll get kind of a look much like that in your blending. You can easily avoid that though by just turning off the pressure sensitivity for your opacity. But I think it also gives a very interesting look too. So, but a lot of people are like, oh, it's too digital looking. Sure, whatever. As long as it looks good, I don't see why people worry about this stuff. I think that's like when you start, it's the stuff you worry about is kind of like the least of your problems. People are often thinking about like, what program are you using? What device are you using? It's like, it doesn't really matter. You put me on any kind of program that I can draw in and I'll figure out a way. Like, I remember in high school, used to go to the computer lab on lunch sometimes, or in junior high, and I just sit there and me and this guy would paint together draw in Microsoft Paint, which is, we go pixel by pixel by pixel, one pixel, and we'd go pixel by pixel, and we would create our gradients by hand. Very tedious work, but you can still get some pretty decent results out of it. I think everybody's just kind of looking for the answer, like how did they get something to look that certain way? And it is always good to learn different techniques, different methods of the way people do stuff, but at the same time, it's not a solution for just basic drawing ability or Even just having a good eye for like photographers and stuff, they can the way that they like a lot of photographers are probably better at the actual layout than and balancing it than probably I am myself. It takes a while for people to kind of see light properly, the way light actually hits stuff. And you'll start noticing it. Like I did a bunch of photography courses in college, and that definitely helped me kind of understand more how light actually hits stuff. And when you're actually setting up lights, trying to get the look that you want can be very time consuming, and it's also but very rewarding once you finally get something down the way you envisioned it originally. I'm starting to think that this might be a little too bright, but I go with it for now. Let's just continue to add some tone, blend it in, get the shapes right. Give Gwen kind of a more muscular booty. I don't know why I'm a big fan of I was gonna say John Cho, but that's not right. Frank Cho. The way he draws women. Because a woman that's like a superhero, in my mind, they shouldn't be weak looking, and often they're drawn with these like very thin arms and like not muscular legs, and like all stuff that if you were a actually fit woman, that you would probably have a little larger than the normal. I'm not saying that this should look gigantic or anything, but it shouldn't be like little stick figure model looking women, at least models from the 80s. So what I did there is, instead of just going lighter, I still want to impart kind of the tone that I want, because I want this pink kind of tone that I have in here to carry through, because it's going to be in the costume itself. So I think just it's going to add a little bit more coherence, I guess, between different parts of the image. So right now, this section here, I'm getting to be pretty happy with. Now it's a little still, this looks a little loose on her, so I gotta make it look a little bit more skin tight. The way I'm gonna do that is probably bring that leg out up here a little bit more, and plus I'm gonna be doing more of a rim light on the back side there of the leg, and this in here I put that highlight. This is why I probably should have been looking at the original reference here. Put this highlight a little high, so I'm probably going to rework that and bring it this kind of section down lower. So I'm just going to grab a thicker or more opaque brush, like the ink brush. So I'm on India ink again, and a bit husky is the brush that I'm using. I could probably actually use the smooth one, probably be better. It's just that I usually keep that one as a larger size, so it's just handy to grab. So I'm just gonna grab kind of the highlight there again. Oh, come on, there. Just wasn't grabbing the color the way I was hoping it would. There we go. Now it looks too bulky and stuff, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shape this leg a little bit more. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove that section. And this is a little high. And I am just going to remove that for now. Now, where the leg is going to be widest, it's going to be down here. And there we go. So it gives it a less, like before, it looked kind of more like it was like a loose, kind of like fold, like the pant was folding a lot. That's where I went a little too far with the folds. But I just pulled it back a little bit and easy enough fix. I'm going back to my oil brush here. I'm using the oil 3 one here. It's just softer brush just to kind of mix back in kind of what I went over there. And yeah, I wish I, just like it with real painting, you start overworking your area, you start losing all that nice texture you created, which I started losing there. Just like in traditional painting. So I'm just gonna up this again so I can kind of see. That's probably all right. There is just checking kind of my original drawing there again. I'm gonna curve this more. Zoom out. Now it's looking a little overly muscular, the leg now. So I'm just gonna come in here with the eraser tool and just bring it back just a bit and get that shape kind of where I want it. Let's take a look. All right. Still looking a little bulky, but we will fix that here. I think it's just the high contrast here that is making it a little bit, just because we're getting no contrast at all on the inside leg here. So I'm just going to fill out that kind of first. I probably do have to go in and mess around with that just a little bit more in spots. And bring that opacity back up. Kind of this line here to define that. I want this shape here needs to be more, needs to come out more. Maybe that peak is a little much. Zoom out. Always zoom out. Take a look out. I'm liking the look of that now. That's much, much better than it was. Still not exactly where I want it at, but it's closer. I'm constantly changing brush sizes. I know that, like I said, some people don't like don't like you to do that. I think because, well, you do have different sizes of brushes while you're painting naturally. Usually in the early stages, you're usually using basically one brush to kind of define everything. Just to get your kind of global lighting or ambient occlusion kind of idea if you come from the 3D world terminology, and it probably is what works best, that terminology. Just means the global kind of lighting, the where kind of like the natural fall off would be from like a base kind of like ambient light. Ambient light meaning like sunlight or it's just kind of what your global lighting is. Like a moonlight would probably be the closest kind of representation of the idea of what I mean by that. Just grabbing the India ink brush here again, and I'm just gonna define that line there a little bit. I want a little bit more separation in this section. I'll grab this dark again. Dark up against highlight is what creates your depth in those and your contrast in those lines. Okay, kind of like that small of the back kind of look there. What we will do here is this kind of more in there. Boy, it's just gonna go an hour today, but we'll go a little bit longer because it seems like we haven't got as much done as I was hoping. But it's coming along. There's just some look that I got with inverting that I'm really looking over and I've tried to mimic, and it's just not, I gotta realize it's just not, it's a different technique than what I'm doing here. So it's just not gonna be kind of the same. The inverted like digital painting, like I was just doing it in black and white, and when I inverted it, man, it gave me this like look that I'd have to describe as like Richard Corbin-esque. I don't know if you guys will know who that is, but definitely Google his artwork. Make sure you're 18 plus though. His artwork can be very risque or violent. Just from the comics he did. But his art style was very unique, and I really enjoy what he does. I want a real rough. Maybe we'll try this 12. This looks like a rougher canvas brush. Just because I'm getting too much blending there. That's way better. Way, way better. Now there's stuff that, like, when I'm looking at that, like my reference, I've done stuff like so different that, like, no wonder it doesn't match. But also, it's a different technique. If I was to do this entirely that way, it would be really tough. It's one of those kind of like happy accident kind of things where I really like the look of that, but I'm not probably couldn't do it throughout. It would be very difficult to get that to work, especially in color. Yeah, I think the depth of that leg there, so I am gonna have to fill that out lighter. Just go in here, work that. And what this brush is doing is it's giving me a lot more texture, which is gonna help with the material look of this, of her costume. Just subtly in spots, you'll see it. I think people can go overboard with their texturing, especially when they're new. They'll go way too hard with and strong with your textures, which can be a very interesting look too. So definitely experiment with it. Just realize that it can be a less is better situation with that. That's where traditional techniques, even though people can make some really grungy looking stuff digitally, I find that in comparison, like, it's night and day. Like what you can create with, well, I guess that's not entirely true. There's some guys that can do it digitally if you have the right paintbrushes and you spend a lot of time kind of curating your brush list of stuff that's going to work and practicing and trying different stuff and creating your own brushes, and you can get some real grungy looking stuff. It's just the multitude of textures that you can create with traditional methods is pretty impressive. Which I do plan on now that I have another workstation in this room. What I plan on doing is doing some traditional painting also live on the stream. Possibly do some like miniature painting or something. I don't know. Maybe some sculpting. Who knows? Alright, let me just back out here again. I'm liking the look of that for the most part. I haven't used this brush before, so we'll see how this works. And I just want to indicate in here kind of a seam line of her outfit. Back in here and do that there too. It's just a little bit of a warmer tone I'm getting, which I don't mind. It's pretty good. Let's leave that part. Do like that color though. Oops. Sometimes you try to press Control Z and you miss completely. Alright. Well, let's keep working down into this leg here. This section here, not entirely happy with, for sure. Gonna have to go in there and fix that up. It's like the angle here is wrong. It probably should be more this angle. That was me trying to copy too much what I'd done before. Which I should probably just close that reference, but I do like little touches that I did in there that I'm gonna try to replicate. Oh, this is an interesting brush. This is the Oil 6 brush of this brush pack. It's interesting. kind of like the 3 best because it gives me kind of a mix between with a little bit of texture and a little bit of the smooth kind of look. That should come up to about here. And this leg, that's another thing that's wrong here. This leg is not correct. Let's give her a better shin there. Now, there are much quicker ways to kind of like fill all of this in and then kind of do what I'm doing at this point. Kind of like what I did in here, and then you just kind of go in and you soften everything and then you keep filling it out and you don't really go into the details until like the last step. But I kind of am liking, I find it funner to kind of just work my way through it slowly. And that's one of the main points to doing this kind of stuff. Even if it's your job, you kind of want it to be fun. No one starts out this to be frustrated, which can easily happen. Don't want to frustrate yourself by trying to rush and get stuff only half the way you want it. I got in a real bad habit of rushing through stuff. Just when you're doing certain types of work and you're trying to get stuff done on timelines and you want to impress people with having your stuff done quickly, you can get into a bad habit where you're kind of, where your stuff looks good and looks finished, but it's only about 60% of the way there that you would usually do it. And then it becomes the norm of the way you do things, which I'm trying to get out of, which is why I'm kind of, at some point, you just learn all these tricks and then that's what your style is. Your style is just a bunch of tricks that you know, which everybody develops shorthand of knowing what something, how to shape and paint something, or like they're all little shorthand tricks that people learn and pick up, but it can become kind of soulless looking a little bit if that's your entire style. And there should be a bit more life to your pieces than that. I'm just gonna bring this highlight up in here. Right. See how that is. Still not a fan of everything in here, but we will keep working on it and see where I can get this to go. Kind of like that. And then I want a darker kind of. kind of in between what I've done before and what I'm doing now. And I don't know which direction to pull it. I think, yeah, this whole area needs to be darker for sure. What else this? Our hamstrings should be coming through a little bit. But then we've also got some folding going on here. Kind of have to know the structures that are going on below before you can kind of work out what's on top. Still want to say what I had before was more of a highlight in here. I'm not thinking, I guess that would work. Because basically the way that the light's coming right now, the light is kind of coming in kind of this way. Even though we're getting our highlight far on this side here. It's going to be ambient light coming up from probably the street coming up. So that's going to give us a nice edge light. But then we're also getting light kind of from this building here, from the windows. That's going to be kind of hitting that. So when you see kind of like the highlight here where it's kind of more saturated and stuff here. And when stuff is not in shade, or when stuff is in shade, it tends to be duller in color. That's why I have it kind of more color kind of hitting the highlight points there. So this being lighter on this side would actually make quite a bit of sense. So I'm just going to grab this and kind of try and change that angle a little bit of the folds in the knee. This is where it's nice to have like actual photographic reference to kind of see. So there is kind of like an area of the knee here that's going to be roundish, but then that's going to have a well kind of leading in, dark well shade that would lead into where the hamstrings are. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I'm gonna do instead. I'm gonna bring up my, I'm getting too fiddly with detail parts there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna come in here with a bigger brush. Try to do some one stroke stuff. So I kind of want it to be inside the knee here. And then we can kind of bring that together. All right. Let's lower this. What I'm just gonna do is what I think is I'm gonna put this up here, bring this kind of highlight in here. I think this shape might be wrong. eraser. I'll bring that back. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'll probably need to go in there and do more detail work later to kind of like define it best, but I'm liking that a lot more. So sometimes you just kind of need to go in there with a larger brush. Well, that's why a lot of people do use like the start of their paintings, kind of like a larger brush at first to kind of just mock in all the shapes. There should be kind of a secondary shadow to that kind of muscle there, but I'm just gonna see how that just pulls out. Kind of like that's when it feels like sculpting. When I just put that shade in there and then just boom, pulled that muscle out with the highlight. And let's just grab the more reddish tone there again. And I'm just going to push it even further in that direction. Here. And yeah. Good. So I'm really liking the look of that leg now. There's still some awkwardness going on in this section here, but for right now I'm thinking that looks pretty good, because I could probably no. It's one of those things where it's just gonna take a little bit of shaping it properly. And I think it's just a little too top heavy. Now it's a little too round. It's going to be a fairly straight area, but it should lead into the calf a little bit better. That's much better. There we go. Computer's hiccuping here. It's slowing down a bit. Alright, so I'm just going to do a little bit more on this leg, and then we'll probably call that a day on it. I'm not sure if you guys want these streams longer or what, but maybe you do if you're drawing along with it, but then if you're the type to just bounce in for a bit, you probably want it shorter. So trying to keep them around a couple hours at most. I also don't want it to be an 80-part series, because I'm taking way too much time. Parsing it all out into little small chunks of stuff to do. This is where you can see I'm kind of doing more of that using that larger brush to create the shapes a little bit better right off the bat, instead of going in there with a small brush. And it's like some people learn like best kind of like, some people sketch. Let me show you with a proper tool here. So some people sketch really nice and loose, and what should I draw here? Let's just do an eye. So some people just do something really loose. And nice long lines. And then some people, when they're first starting out though, do better or find it easier to do kind of this kind of thing where they're kind of building it slower, and often it can lead to something looking more stiff as a picture than as a nice flowy thing. But it's almost like they're more thinking more in the finishing step than someone who is really loose. So it almost looks more like a finished piece than, say, a person doing a real loose. Work, because then they're going to have to go in and they're going to have to do kind of this where you're really deciding what line, tightening up all the lines and everything. But if you're a beginner, I think it's great that you are kind of thinking of the end step. So a lot of these like little detailing things are stuff that you're going to be able to do later on when you kind of when you're able to kind of get the loose gesture drawings done. So if you're drawing like that and someone's like, you need to loosen up, at some point you do. But if you're just in the beginning stages of learning, feel free to do that, because it's just basically you're building your confidence and your abilities to put down bold lines, bold colors. Inking is really interesting skill. That's why I always think people should, if you paint, you should also do line drawing, in my opinion. It's just going to really increase the confidence in your line work, so you're not going to be in there like I have been lately. It's kind of working, but you'll be able to just be like, no, I want these like big lines. It's kind of like the more you can depict with less work, the more talent you're, well, not more talent, the more it's almost like experience. Like you'll see it, you can tell an experienced painter. I just went to the Van Gogh exhibit, and one of the things that I noticed is that in his early career, it did look stiff, his paintings, but he was going for a totally different style of but he was still kind of mixing his paint on the palette. And this is kind of like the idea of a person saying, wanting this color. So you want that something in your picture to be that kind of pink. Now, early on in your art career, what you'll be doing is you'll probably be buying straight up 2 million different tubes of paint to make it the color that you want. Even though you can really mix colors with just the primary colors, and you can get pretty much anything you want. but as there's certain colors that you'll probably buy just to expedite the process, so you're not having to mix huge chunks of paint, especially kind of like browns people often do. But anyway, so they'll mix it on their palette. So here's your palette, and you'll have that color, then you'll have this different shade of it, then you'll have maybe you'll have blue, and what they'll do is they'll dip it in there and they'll put it on exactly that color. Now, what you see his progression go from is he went from a guy who was doing that to instead taking elements of that color. So you'll take what kind of red? So I'll take a red here and just working that red, and then go in there and creating that similar color on the canvas. There's a little bit more blue in the red, but instead of just picking the color, he was actually instead creating the color on the painting instead of the palette, which is a very, very important step, where you go kind of from painting by numbers kind of idea to really developing your ability to know kind of how to get the colors you want on the page. That's why it was like he could use these vibrant colors, and when he switches to pointillism, it's such an it's such an easy step, it seems like, for him in the color mixing, because instead of him just dry brushing or wet painting and blending with still it's a dry brush, it's not a dry brush technique, but usually you'll have two wet paint places of wet paint. Basically it's almost like you're using a mixer when you digitally do it, and you're going in there and you're with blending them together. So you went from kind of that to instead kind of more mixing the color on the page. It's harder in digital for me to show this just because it's not an additive. There's an additive color process, and then there's a subtractive color process. So basically, one, if you add all the colors together, you're getting more like a white. One, you add all the colors together, you're getting like a black. So one is the actual light color of the light is creating the new colors when you blend them together. And then the other is kind of like the shade of the tone. Hard to explain. So anyways, there's an additive and a subtractive model. This is RGB, red, green, blue base. So it should be a subtractive model. So if I had, depending on if I have the correct blending modes, when I'm putting up red, or red, green, blue, I should be getting a white when I mix those together. Whereas if it was paint and I mix red, green, and blue paint together, you get black. So anyways, so he got to that point, and then he got to the point where instead of actually creating the color on the page, mixing his colors on the page by taking like a green, like say he wanted an aqua tone, so he takes I had a mixer, so takes a green, takes a blue, and he just dry brushing, working over the blue till he gets kind of the aquamarine tone underneath. It just adds depth to your color. Instead of oh, that just basically erased it. I pressed a little too hard. And then he graduated to delete that, to creating that same kind of look with basically solid tones. So you have a bunch of blue, or I could probably just do this whole section blue. And then he has green. Now, depending on the strength, I'm using kind of really bright colors here. Then you zoom out. Can't really work the way I wanted it to. Anyways, you get the idea. Your eye is going to actually be blending the colors. Anyways, I thought it was interesting because it's very much, you can see kind of the progression of what a lot of people's art is. But it was interesting too to me because he starts off really kind of tight, not very gestural. So he had very stiff kind of characters and stuff. And then he moves into more of a flowing, more gestural style where you can see that's when he started doing kind of more like started first mixing the color on the palette, or moved from being on the palette to mixing color on the page. I should do a video about this with like actual paint, not digitally. It'd be way easier. But you could totally see like I should still be working on stuff while I'm doing this. You can totally see like the progression that most artists actually have in their art, through his art. But it was very interesting to see at the end where he ends up is kind of, goes from these nice flowing, nice loose sketches, and then when you're doing pointillism, you got all these like precise, slow, methodical little lines. So it's kind of a mixture of kind of like where he began and kind of where he ended up, in my opinion, at least. I don't know. It's kind of it's definitely worth seeing those exhibits. I'm sure some of them, there's a lot of them out right now, though. I'm sure some are better than others. The one I went to was pretty good because I got you could tell where you could see the progression of his art. It wasn't just one kind of thing, and some of them are more about the spectacle of feeling like you're inside of one of his paintings, which is kind of neat. But as an artist myself, I'm more looking for learning about kind of how he did stuff. So his artwork, like, you can very much, if you want to see kind of like how the progression of an artist, kind of where, in my opinion, where you go from being kind of a journeyman artist to being kind of like an expert level artist, his his progression is definitely interesting to look at. Would he have been as good a realism artist as he was kind of impressionistic? Probably not, in my opinion. But as he never really got to quite the level of technique, just because he switched styles. You'll see that often with lots of people, but that's kind of what creates kind of your unique style. And you're not really like he was. Like, you're basically a culmination of all your influences, right? I don't think anybody creates anything in a vacuum, as much as a person might think that they do. I don't think that's exactly true. Not really being true to yourself. I think if you think that you're kind of creating stuff in a vacuum with no influence. My influences are mostly from comics, but for like painting, I do like I'm a big Rembrandt, that kind of school painting fan. Even though I guess it's debatable if they were using like camera obscura techniques and stuff or not. How much of that is skill, or how much of that is just using a certain technique. But just setting up the lighting, the staging of like those paintings is incredible. So even if you are a person that believes kind of that they were basically just using the camera obscura to practically trace, there's good it's a very good documentary someone did where they were painting in that Rembrandt style. I am thinking, right? Yeah, there's a good documentary where this guy basically uses similar like camera obscura technique to paint, basically recreate one of his paintings. Forgetting which one it was though, but he actually in the end came out, and he was a very novice painter, and in the end he came out with a painting that was arguably better than the original in parts. So it does make people call into question, well, the validity of like how much talent did it actually take. But you also got to think of like, just to come up with the staging alone for the if he did have models, like pretty unbelievable. Anyways, that was my weird tangent for this this stream. Darn, I'm just not just muddying up stuff. Yeah, I think I'm probably near the end of what I'm gonna do today. I'm just kind of mucking around and mudding up stuff a little bit too much. But anyways, thank you guys for anybody who stayed this long and watched it, and we will come back next week, and we will try to get further along in this picture. And I probably should save it. as a Clip Studio format picture. And oh no, I have to rename it here. So it's the live version. All right, so thank you for joining me, and I just want you guys to just leave any questions or comments that you have below, and I will do my best to respond. And I want to thank you guys for listening and watching. So keep creative.